Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Impress with coverage of the last round of the 2017 London Chess Classic. Also the last round of the 2017 Grand Chess Tour. And it was Magnus Carlsen, the world champion, who won the Grand Chess Tour. He had a tough tournament in London. He didn't feel well for the second half of the tournament and suffered a bad loss in the previous round against his friend, but also his nemesis Jan Nepomniachtchi. He never beat Jan Nepomniachtchi in a classical game. In his last round, Carlsen played black against Levon Aronian from Armenia, the man of the year, winning Norway chess, winning the World Cup. And let's see how this game went. Aronian opened d4, e6 from Carlsen, knight f3, c5, g3, c takes, knight takes, queen b6 in a very unusual opening, bishop g2, bishop c5, attacking this knight twice, so e3, d5, queen g4, threatening to take on g7, so bishop back to f8, castling, knight f6, and that is attacking the queen, so queen went back to e2. Carlsen said afterwards in his interview that it was clear that both players wanted a real game and wanted to leave theory as soon as possible. And that's what they did. e5 by the world champion, attacking the knight, but Aronian played queen b5 check to deal with that. Bishop d7, now both queen and knight are hanging, so Aronian has to swap the queens. Queen takes, a takes, knight b3, knight c6, bishop d2, and bishop d6, which Carlsen called a bad move because he had missed white's plan, which is knight c3. And as you can see, that pawn on d5 is now attacked by both knight and bishop and only defended by the knight. So knight e7 was played to defend that pawn one more time. a4, Carlsen castled, and knight b5, threatening the bishop on d6. Carlsen decided to take on b5, giving the bishop pair, and a takes b5, and it was Grandmaster Chirila in the live broadcast who said that black is on the back foot, as his pawn structure is bad, and white has the bishop pair, and that he was facing a long boa constrictor grind. Rook ac8 from Carlsen, bishop c3, h5, rook fd1, rook fd8, knight d2, and h4. Grandmaster Sararon said the world champion is in an aggressive mood. Knight f3, Carlsen took, and Aronian took back with the h-pawn, and because now pawn e5 is hanging, attacked twice, only defended once, the Grandmasters in the live broadcast expected knight g6, or at least that is one possibility, and then white can play bishop h3, hitting the rook, rook c7, and then bishop f5 to try and take that knight so that white can then win a pawn on e5, but black has knight e7, counter-attacking the bishop, and that is one possible variation. But Carlsen did not try and protect his e5 pawn, he played the pawn to e4 and dealt with the problem that way, giving now away this nice d4 square for the bishop. Knight g5, knight g6, rook a7 hitting the b7 pawn, rook b8, and here in the live broadcast they were looking at bishop takes f6, then g takes f6, attacking the knight, and then knight h3, and Grandmaster Sararon showed a very instructive setup. He said, we have given up that bishop pair voluntarily to go into a position with opposite colored bishops, and then white has a nice target on d5 to attack, and he explained that white can play c3, rook to d2, bishop to f1 to e2 to d1 to b3, and this knight to f4 all aiming at winning or putting a lot of pressure on the d5 pawn. And because black doesn't have a light squared bishop, this may be difficult for him to defend that pawn. Very instructive. But Aronian did not take on f6, he played bishop d4, a different plan. Attacking the b6 pawn, so Carlsen played bishop c5, and now surprisingly Aronian took on c5, not only giving the bishop pair back, or at least now white does not longer have the bishop pair, but also straightening out black's pawn formation. But the whole idea behind that is the move c4, and he's trying to weaken up, soften up that pawn on e4 so that his bishop can get into the game. Knight e7, c takes d5, now this e4 pawn is no longer protected by a pawn, and knight c8, a very instructive maneuver from Carlsen this time. He's sacrificing that pawn that white just took on d5, and he will shortly sacrifice a second pawn. Afterwards Carlsen said that he was happy with this as he said, stabilized the position and has finally something to play for. He felt he had played badly just after the opening, that he had a bad position, but by sacrificing these two pawns he got back into the game. Let's look at what happened. The rook is attacked and the rook went to a4, and that is also very instructive. The idea is that with rook a4, white is now attacking this pawn on e4 with 3 pieces, and it's only defended by the knight. And because of that, Carlsen has now to play knight b6 to attack that rook again. If the rook had gone to a3 in this position, then the knight would have been able to go to d6, and that is a very nice blockading square. But because of rook a4, that was not possible, because then you lose the pawn on e4. So Aronian lured that knight to b6, and only then did he play rook a3. Now the black knight is on b6 instead of d6. Very nice from Aronian. Knight c4 from Carlsen, rook c3, and knight d6. That knight is now on that ideal blockading square, but of course it costs another pawn, and Aronian took it. Rook takes c5. So Carlsen has given a second pawn for activity, because he can now activate that rook, but also to set up a fortress with this blockading knight. Yes, white has 2 extra pawns, but let's look at those pawns. One is on d5, that is blockaded, and the other one is on b2, which is part of a doubled pawn. So those 2 extra pawns for white are not that strong yet. Rook a8 as planned by Carlsen, bishop h3, and rook e8. Rook c7, king f8, b6, and rook e5. He would not have played that move earlier if he had played rook e5 on the previous move. So with the king on g8, then there is knight takes f7. And if you take that knight, there is bishop e6, and white has a winning position. But that's why Carlsen played king f8. b6, then rook e5, and here Aronian, he said afterwards that he thought he had a winning position, that he just needed to add the final touch to it, and he thought he would do that with a piece sacrifice, knight e6 check. Carlsen took it, d takes e6, and now the knight on d6 is attacked by the rook on d1, and Aronian said afterwards that he thought that Carlsen now would have had to play rook to d8, and then he was planning king g2, and he said black has no moves, it's almost a zugzwang position. But Carlsen played a better move, knight f e8. Attacking a rook, so rook went to d7, with the threat to take on d6. And Carlsen found a very strong move, rook a5, and that is a move that Aronian had missed. He confessed afterwards. Here it's time for white to bail out to a draw. He should have taken on d6 here. Both players agreed on that after the game. Knight takes d6, rook takes d6, and we can get a variation like this. Rook ed5, rook takes e7, check. That's an important move. White does not want to allow the king to come to e7 to block the pawn. Then this bishop will be worthless. So e7 check, king takes, and then lots of pawns get cleaned up. Bishop c8, rook d6, counter-attacking white's b-pawn. Bishop takes, rook, bishop takes, and rook takes. And this is a drawn endgame with rook and pawn versus a bishop and 3 pawns. But Aronian did not want to go for that. He still felt that he had winning chances, and he played b4. Kicking the rook, and the rook went to d5, dealing with the rook takes d6 threat. Rook went to a1, looks very good for white. Rook e8, and then the knight is pinned. Looks good for white, but Carlsen played now rook back to b5. And after rook a8, and now this knight is hanging, because it's no longer protected by this knight, because of the pin. He just dealt with that problem by taking a pawn. And the rook is protecting the knight. Very nice. Bishop g4 from Aronian. And now rook d5 from Carlsen. Now this rook assumes the job of defending that knight, while this rook can take another pawn. And here Grandmaster Chirila proposed rook a4 to protect the pawn, but Grandmaster Sarawan said, "This makes a painful expression on my eyes," and Aronian did not want to play that very passive move either. He played king g2, Carlsen took that pawn, and rook back to a1, with possible ideas of rook h1 and rook h8 checkmate. But Carlsen calmly played rook bb5, and if you now play rook h1, there is king g8 and there is no checkmate. The king is just covering the h8 square. So Aronian did not play rook h1, he played bishop e2. Attacking the rook. Rook went now to b2, and Aronian may have played bishop e2 to now play bishop c4, but he saw now that that was not possible, because not because of rook dd2, which looked logical, but it loses on the spot because of, indeed, e7, and we have a checkmate on the board. A nice checkmate. But after bishop c4, that bishop can just be taken. It looks like you just lose that rook on d5, but there is knight takes e3 check. Very nice move. A fork, and the knight cannot be taken by the pawn because it's pinned. Nice variation. So Aronian now saw that bishop c4 doesn't work, so he played the bishop back to g4. Rook dd2, Carlsen wants that f2 pawn, and then there's no more compensation for white for the piece that he's down. Then the white king will be as exposed as the black king is. King h3, the game is more or less over at this stage. Carlsen took on f2, king h4, rook h2 check, and the grandmasters in the studio expected resignation, but Aronian played on for a few more moves. Bishop h3, and now g5 check. Nice move, deflecting the king so that black can win his bishop. And if the king goes to g4, there is knight f6 check with a fork. Aronian played king h5, there goes his bishop, and king g6. And here a very good move from Carlsen, rook f2, to avoid white being able to play rook f1 with attack of all white's pieces against black's king. Rook f2 prevents that. e7 check from Aronian. King g8 played instantly, and Aronian's last trick, rook takes d6. At least he wins one of the pieces back that he is down, because you cannot take that rook, because then it's white who wins this game. Rook a8 check, knight e8, rook takes, rook f8 and checkmate. Of course Carlsen did not fall for that. He played rook back to h7. White's rook is hanging, the pawn is hanging, and black is playing rook g7 check, and when the king goes, then the black king comes to f7, and there's nothing to play for white anymore. So here Levon Aronian resigned, and here you can see the moment of resignation. Levon Aronian had a very good position. Carlsen's concept by sacrificing those two pawns to get a fortress was very nice, and then Aronian pushed too far. He overplayed his hand. He should have built out after rook a5 by taking on d6 and going into that drawn endgame. He wanted to win, and as a result lost the game. That can happen, but at least it was a great fight and great entertainment. So Magnus Carlsen won the 2017 Grand Chess Tour. He did not win the London Chess Classic. That one was won by the American Fabiano Caruana after a rapid and blitz tiebreak against Jan Nepomniachtchi. There were 3 draws in the tiebreak, and Caruana won the last game with white. The last game before the Armageddon game. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the Chess to Impress channel. Please leave a comment, and if you liked the video, it would be great if you could share it on social media. You also may want to check out my Chess to Progress channel. The link is in the description box. This is Rick for Chess to Impress. Thank you for watching.